Thank you for joining today's webinar on creating a retired medical trust. My name is Hank Kim, and I'm the Executive Director of NCPERS. Today's program is part of our Center for Online Learning, which provides remote continuing education to public pension trustees, staff, and other fiduciaries and stakeholders. Leading us in today's webinar is Shana Saichek with the Wagner Law Group. The Wagner Law Group is a boutique ERISA firm and has one of the largest groups of employee benefit attorneys in the country. The professional staff of 34 attorneys include attorneys with long experience at the federal agencies that regulate benefit plans, such as the U.S. Department of Labor, PBGC, and the IRS. Ms. Saichek developed the concept of a retired medical trust nearly 25 years ago to assist public employees to handle the cost of health coverage between retirement and Medicare. As always, we do encourage audience participation. Please submit your questions by using the Q&A function on the Zoom platform. Your questions will be answered near the end of the session. So with that, Shana, thank you for being here, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon to everybody, depending where you are. I am really delighted to talk about this. I developed this idea of a retiree medical trust many years ago and now have the satisfaction to see them thriving. I know most of you are pension plan trustees, and this is not a pension plan, but I also know that many of you struggle with what to do with the retirees and their medical coverage. The way that I got into this was that I have been a benefits attorney for my whole career and have also worked with police unions for my whole career and their employers. And one of my clients came to me in the mid-1990s and said, you know, our guys, they're deputy sheriffs, they're not retiring, and they should be. They're in their mid-50s, their bodies have taken a beating, they really deserve retirement, but they're not taking it because they have to give up their medical coverage. And many of my clients are in California where there is no medical coverage as a retiree. I know in some parts of the country, you're more likely to have retiree medical coverage, but it's also being cut back. So I looked through the code and kind of burrowed around in the Internal Revenue Code and tried to find what to do about this problem, and came up with this idea of a retiree medical trust, which is based on several provisions of the Internal Revenue Code that allows you to have a very highly tax-favored method to put money away during their working lives and then take it out after they retire for medical benefits, either health insurance premiums or other costs. So legally, it's a health plan. It's not subject to pension plan rules, but it operates similar to a pension plan in the sense that it's funded during employment and then the benefits are given after retirement. So I've worked on these, for 25 years now, so I sometimes forget what might not be obvious. So please feel free, as I'm going through the slides, to ask questions. Hank will gather them, and I'll be happy to answer them at the end. Okay, so I think you can see my PowerPoint. We've just got the cover up there, and now if I can work my screen, I'm going to move along. When I was younger, I used to get nervous about giving a speech, and now that I'm not so young, I'm just nervous about the technology. So let me just see what I can do here. There we go. Okay, what is a retiree medical trust? So let me give you the basic description. It's a trust that reimburses healthcare premiums and expenses, either one, after retirement. It is not part of a pension plan. It's not a 401h plan. It's a separate trust, separate from the pension plan. You can set it up to provide a lifetime stream of benefits, just like a pension plan. It can last for a lifetime, but it's based on fixed contributions. So it has features of a defined contribution plan in the sense that the contributions are negotiated at the bargaining table. They're a fixed amount. That's all the employer will be responsible for. $100 a month, $300 a month, whatever is negotiated, has to go in on everyone in the unit, in the bargaining unit. And then at retirement, the plan will provide a lifetime stream of benefits, say $500 a month for the lifetime of the retiree. And it can also, almost all of our plans, I think every one of them also provides a surviving spouse benefit. Some of our plans do cut off benefits at Medicare because they say that the gap, the real need for public sector employees, particularly public safety, is from retirement to Medicare. So some of them will cut off the benefit at Medicare, and that, of course, will give a bigger benefit. There's one thing I'll go into in more detail later, but I want to tell you right now, it's not a defined benefit plan in the sense that the benefits are not vested. They're variable. The trustees can vary the amount of the benefit, and I'll discuss that a little bit more later. Okay, so this can be set up to be controlled by a union board of trustees or an employer board of trustees or a joint board, similar to various models of a defined benefit pension plan or a 457 plan. And as I said, it's particularly suitable for police and firefighter groups who have that gap in medical coverage. But actually what we're finding now over time is that people need this even after Medicare. That is, people come to the rude awakening when they're 65 years old that their medical costs are not all taken care of. That is, there's a charge for Medicare coverage, there's Medigap coverage, there's different charges after, medical expenses after retirement that are not covered by Medicare, eyeglasses, hearing aids, podiatry. So most of our plans who actually had cut off the benefit at Medicare are now removing that. They're removing the termination and they're running it for life. Okay, here I wanted to show you, these are actual clients of my firm, and I want to give you a couple examples here of how it works. And we've put up a poll question there. We would like to know if your jurisdiction offers retiree medical coverage, and if it does, is there consideration to cut it back? So I'm going to continue to talk, but if you send in your answers, I'd be very interested. Because we're finding that if a jurisdiction is thinking of cutting back their medical coverage, this is usually a lesser cost alternative. And some cities and counties will go to this model because they can limit their costs. It can be a defined contribution, both in actuality, like $100 a month, and also for GASB purposes, it falls into a completely different category. Okay, so now let me run through this chart. I'm not going to go through the whole chart, but I'll take a couple examples. If we just take the top line, Public Safety Association number 1, go across that top line. Their contribution is $128 per month per employee. Oh, excuse me, I'm just looking at the responses. Most of you offer retiree medical coverage, and most are not. Some are cutting back and some are not. Okay, very, very interesting. Okay, so let me continue with this, because some jurisdictions have set this up as a supplement to their retiree medical coverage. That is, they offer some amount of coverage, and the union usually will come to them and say, we'd like to have another savings account for medical expenses because we realize that the coverage doesn't cover everything. So this gets set up to give an extra, a supplemental payment after retirement. Okay, so back to the chart. Public Safety Association number 1 puts in $128 a month. Right now, according to their actuarial studies, they're providing a monthly benefit of $630 a month. That's after 25 years of being in the plan as an active employee. If they work for 30 years, the benefit will be $756 a month. That's for life. And then this particular one, the surviving spouse benefit, I'm going across the top line, 50% for 2 years if the police officer or the employee dies young. Let's say they die in some kind of tragic incident. The spouse will get this benefit for 2 years. We call it a bridge benefit, where the spouse is adjusting to the new reality, and then it'll get cut off, and then it'll pick up again at age 53 to age 65 until she reaches Medicare age. So there's a lot of variation in plan design. All these are slightly different plans. Let's look at number 2. The contribution is $150 per month. that's negotiated at the bargaining table for everyone in the bargaining unit. And this is not an elective plan, and I'll discuss that more later. The benefit is $517 a month after 25 years, or $621 after 30 years, and there's a surviving spouse benefit of 50%. Okay, I want to point out a couple of these. You can look at them in more detail later, but just to show you a little bit of the variation in plan design, because if you set up such a plan, there's quite a lot of discretion left to the plan sponsor on the plan design. So if you go down to Public Association number 6, 4% of pay is what they're putting in, and they get $1,100 a month. Okay, doesn't look quite so good. It's only double the contribution, whereas some of the first ones I showed you are 3 to 4 times the contribution. Like if you look at number 5, $375 is the contribution, $1,125 is the benefit. That's roughly 3 times the contribution. What happened with Public Safety Association number 6 is that they decided to cover their people who were already retired when the plan started. And so those people never contributed to the plan, but the union decided to cover them. So that cut down the benefit level because they were taking care of that older generation. In that plan also, they're giving 100% of a surviving spouse benefit, which is on the more generous side. And then I want to show you Public Safety Association number 7. They're putting in only $120 per month, and they're getting $1,270 per month of a benefit. Okay, the reason for that is that in that jurisdiction, the employer covers retiree medical until age 70. So they don't have to start picking up and paying the benefit at age 55 or 53, like with a lot of the plans. The trust isn't picking up the benefit until age 70. So therefore, it's a much higher benefit. Okay, so the next slide, slide 4, gives you a few more examples. And I think you can see, if you look at them kind of in whole, that generally the benefit will be roughly 3 to 4 times the contribution. Okay, so let me talk about the tax advantages. This is really driven by the tax breaks you get, okay? The contributions go in pre-tax. That means if the parties negotiate $100 of a contribution per month, the entire $100 goes into the trust. It's not after tax. There's nothing taken out for FICA, FUTA, any tax deduction. The entire contribution goes in. This is really a big advantage. The only way you get that advantage is if contributions are non-elective. That's why this is not like a cafeteria plan or a 457 plan, where each participant chooses whether to participate and at what rate. This is something negotiated for the entire bargaining unit. And what we have found is that normally the union gets it, the employer gets it, they both understand this. There does have to be a type of an educational campaign with your employees, because they're all of a sudden they're seeing, I'm losing $100 out of my paycheck. I didn't know this. I thought I had a choice. So you have to explain to them the type of benefit they're going to get. And what we usually do is we bring out retirees to explain to them what a burden it is to have medical expenses after you retire. I mean, when I started doing these in the late 90s, I had firefighter clients who came to me and said, you know, my dad has moved in with me, my retired firefighter dad, because he couldn't pay his rent and pay his medical coverage. And so that's the kind of thing that generated these plans. Okay, also the money goes into a tax-favored vehicle, either a VEBA. I assume most of you are familiar with a VEBA. It's a tax-exempt trust, or a Section 115 trust. These are both creations of the Internal Revenue Code, where money is held in a trust that is not taxed. So if that trust has $1 million in it and it makes 5%, then that $50,000 of earnings will not be taxed. So of course that adds to your benefit levels. And the frosting on the cake is that you get tax-free reimbursement of your medical expenses. That is the distribution that the plan gives out every month, $500 a month, $1,000 a month, is not taxed to the retiree. It's tax-free, And the reason for that is that it's reimbursing medical expenses. It's a type of a health plan. So just like when you're an active employee, if you go to the hospital and you incur $30,000 in expenses and your health plan pays it, you're not taxed on that $30,000. The same thing here. When you use this money to pay for medical expenses, you will not be taxed on it. And so, in fact, of course, the plan won't give you the money until you've submitted proof of a medical expense. And then you get to take the money tax-free. So that's really an amazing tax favored vehicle. That is, in my work on employee benefit plans, which I've done for nearly 40 years, you don't find this kind of, like, all completely tax-free. In fact, let's go to the next slide where I can make this point. Compare it to a tax-deferred pension plan. Your average pension plan, every pension plan, is deferring taxation. So if you get a pension of $1,500 a month, when you get that $1,500 a month, you pay tax on it. I mean, there's a couple jurisdictions, I think Illinois, where it's not taxed, but in the bulk of the country, when you get your pension, you're going to be taxed on it. Whereas for these retiree medical plans, you're not taxed on the benefit. So it's really a tax avoidance scheme. And the reason that's important is that it allows the benefit to be pumped up because you're not having to pay tax at any stage of the process. All right, so I want to talk about some more features of the plan. Usually what will happen is that a union and an employer will get together and decide to do this. And or it could be the union or the employer decides to do it and brings it to the bargaining table to negotiate a contribution. So what we have found is that in some cities, the cities decided to set it up and they take it to each of their bargaining units. So they have a police bargaining unit, they have miscellaneous employees, they have janitorial employees, they have bus drivers, and each bargaining unit will negotiate its contribution into the plan, and it could be a different contribution for each bargaining unit. Within the bargaining unit, the contribution has to be the same, but you can have different levels of contribution for each bargaining unit. As I've mentioned, it's collectively bargained for mandatory participation. That if there's an IRS audit, and occasionally we've had random audits, they will look to make sure that the contribution is mandatory. Because if it's not, all those contributions are going to become taxable income, and that's a terrible problem to deal with retroactively. And as I said, depending how you set it up, you can avoid GASB defined benefit reporting obligations, because really the way you can set it up so it's a defined contribution plan under GASB or even a non-governmental plan. Okay, so how are these plans administered? I think you'll all be pretty familiar with this as pension plan trustees. It's going to look similar. You're going to have trustees that are employees of the union or members of the union or employees of the government, or you can have a joint board. So you can have an all-union board, let's say 7 firefighters. You can have an all-employer board. We have those with the city treasurer and the city HR person. Or you can have a joint board. That's completely a political decision. It's not a legal decision. So it depends on the bargaining atmosphere and realities of your jurisdiction. Okay, then whoever the trustees are, they have fiduciary responsibility under federal law, because this is set up under the federal tax code, and so you're subject to many provisions of the tax code, and the most important ones are involve fiduciary responsibility. That is, this can be a plan subject to ERISA, which is the federal law that governs private sector benefit plans. That will happen if, let's say, a union, which is not a government, sets up the plan, and then it's not a governmental plan. You have a government contributing to it, but it's actually going to fall under ERISA. So these are not important decisions in terms of plan design, but you're going to be subject either to ERISA or you'll always be subject to the Internal Revenue Code. So you're going to be subject to the Internal Revenue Code and possibly to ERISA. They're fairly similar. You're probably familiar with reporting obligations, disclosure obligations. They're very similar to any other benefit plan that you probably work with. And the trustees then that are chosen by the plan sponsor set up the plan design. There are many decisions that usually the plan sponsor and the board of trustees will confer on: eligibility, how many years you have to be in the plan to get the lifetime benefit. We never use the word vesting for this plan because it's not a pension plan, but you'll have an eligibility threshold. Like, let's say you have to be in the plan for 5 years to get the lifetime benefit. Are you going to have a surviving spouse benefit? Are you going to cover surviving dependents? Are you going to have a disability benefit? Are you going to cut it off at Medicare? There are many plan design decisions that are determined by policy. They're not legal decisions. The trustees will decide that. Now, I want to go into a discussion of the two basic models for a retiree medical trust. There's one thing we call the pooled account, and the other we call the individual account. This is akin to, on the one hand, a DB pension plan, where all the money goes into one pool, or a 457 plan, where the money is held in individual accounts. Both are completely legal, and this is a decision for you to make, and I'm going to go through some of the advantages and disadvantages of each. So I want to just caution that when I say defined benefit plan, it's similar in certain operational ways, but it's not a vested plan. I just really want to make this clear. The benefits here are not vested. They all go into a pool, and then the plan will hire an actuary to say, given this pool and these demographics, where can we set the benefit? And then the actuary will give you a range, anywhere from, say, 400 to 450, and the trustees will decide. However, the following year, that benefit could be lowered to 375. Now, I don't want this to alarm you, because we have found that rarely have the plans reduced the benefit because they're conservative in setting it. As a benefits attorney, I have watched the demise of defined benefit plans in the private sector, and it has been a very difficult thing to watch. I know my mentor in this business told me that when 401k plans started, it was a very bad development, because in the private sector, that was pretty tempting. Employees thought they wanted their own account. Employers didn't want the obligation of the defined benefit plan, and the whole, most of the country went to defined contribution plans. And now, of course, there's a big problem with people not having enough retirement savings. There's leakage of all kinds from 401k plans. So we have a looming social problem, as I'm sure you're all aware. It's been very gratifying to see that in the public sector, defined benefit plans have continued. To me, they are the best type of social policy to give a lifetime benefit. So we do favor this pooled account. But the point I was wanting to make was this. I have counseled my clients to be very conservative in setting their benefit levels. So even though they could lower the benefit level, that's never a fun thing to do. So I've urged them, and I've urged the actuaries, be conservative. Don't set this too high. Don't be risky. Don't push up your assumed interest rate too high. So the plans, if you look back at that chart, they are paying 3 to 4 times the contribution, but that's all been set on fairly conservative assumptions. So my point is, when I say that the trustees can reduce the benefit, it's legally correct. Seldom happens. The only time, really, that I can recall with all my clients, which is dozens of clients, that it happened, would have been after 2008. Okay, there was such a drop in the market after 2008 that they had to drop the benefit level. But guess what? The market dropped, what was it, 40%? Nobody dropped their benefit more than, say, 5%, because the actuary told them, we're going to smooth this over time. I'm sure you know about smoothing. And we assume, based on investment manager discussions, that the market's going to go back up. Well, sure enough, of course, 2009, 2010, the market took off again. So although they dropped it 5%, by 2010 or 2011, they could again raise the benefit. Now, if the market had stayed flat, it would have been a different story. But the point is, operating a large pool of money with a long-term time horizon, you're able to smooth out the bumps. So the plans do preserve the right to reduce the benefit, but as I say, they seldom use it. All right, so that's the one large investment pool. The contributions are made during employment. Plan assets are pooled and invested on a long-term time horizon. Every one of my plans, they hire a professional investment manager. They have an investment policy statement. They set a long-term target. Most of the plans are around 6 to 6.5% now. We all know what's happened in the public sector and the private sector when they shot up the assumed earnings rate to 7.5%, 8%. We ran into problems. So these plans have been very conservative in that regard. Some are even at 5.5%. And then the benefits are paid from the pool after retirement. So every 2 or 3 years, the trustees will hire an actuary who will look at all the data and decide, okay, this year I think you can increase the benefit by 3% or whatever it is. They look at contributions often increase. They usually increase. The parties go back to the bargaining table and they go from 100 a month to 125 a month. And so that affects then the projected benefit. Okay, so now I want to give you a discussion of the comparison between a pool plan and an individual account plan. And we do have retiree medical trusts that have an individual account plan design. As I say, perfectly legal. We are prejudiced in favor of pool plans for the simple reason, which I'm going to show you, which is that they give better benefits in the aggregate. An actuary explained this to me years ago. It was very interesting to me. But in some jurisdictions, the members want individual account. It makes no difference to the employer. We're talking about the same contribution by the employer, but it plays out in different benefits for the retiree. Okay, so in this, we did an actual study of a client of mine on the West Coast. They were setting up their plan. They were deciding, do we want a pool plan or an individual account plan? So their data was what I've put here, which is the average hire date, this was a police group, was age 28. The average retirement date was 53. And over the course of that career, they would have made contributions of $102,000. Now, let me say, I can't remember, that might have been 1%. This was many years ago. So even if it were 1%, that number would be higher now, but it doesn't matter for purposes of our example. So then the actuary did a study, put all that together, and said, in a monthly benefit, with that data, your benefit will be $713 for life. And if you're the individual account plan, if you were to annuitize it, it would be $587 per month. Now let me sidetrack for a moment and talk about annuitizing. You may know that in the 401k plan world, there's a lot of talk about annuitizing 401k balances, because what happens is people retire. They have a certain amount of money in their 401k plan and they spend it very quickly. They have ideas and they spend it. Instead of thinking this is my retirement income for the rest of my life, they think this is my second home, or this is my boat, or whatever. Or they have needs, they have hardship. And the statistics all show now, the studies, that the 401k plan balance disappears very quickly, much more quickly than their life disappears. And so there is a movement now to annuitize the 401k balance. So you farm it out to an insurance company that provides annuities. And I, in fact, think that's a good idea. And some of our individual account plans are considering it. So if you retire and you have $400,000 in your individual account, you could choose, or the plan design could mandate that gets annuitized, so it will last for life. Now, of course, if you're one of the unlucky people who dies 2 years later, you're not going to get the benefit of your whole balance. I mean, you can negotiate with the annuity company for a death benefit, but that's a detail that complicates it. But if you live past your mortality, your expected mortality, you're one of the lucky ones that lives to 90 instead of dying at 83 or whatever the projection is, you will continue to get that benefit for life. So as plan trustees, you have to decide on social policy. Do you want to do that or don't you? But in any event, let me come back to the main discussion here. So in the pool plan, the monthly benefit would have been $713. In the individual account, it would have been $587. That's a pretty significant difference. Okay, why the difference? Why? Because of investments. In the pool plan, you can assume a rate of 6.5% for the life of the plan. over time, the stock market and the, you work on pension plans, that's a pretty safe assumption. In the individual account, you can't assume that because the person has control over their investments. And what happens is that in their early 50s, at some point, they think, well, I don't have such a long-term time horizon, I might not, and they start investing more conservatively. So even the 4.5 is a little bit aggressive if you average it over the lifetime, because the older they get, the more they go into investments that only make 3%, 2%. And so that's why, if I go back up, there's a difference in the ending benefit, because over the lifetime of the person, the investment portfolio has been more conservative for the individual account. So again, you could set up either one, but this is the main reason, excuse me, that we philosophically prefer the pooled plan, not a legal decision. We also prefer it because it does give a lifetime benefit. And unless you've annuitized your individual account plan, it's going to run out probably before the person dies. So as a matter of social policy, I personally believe it's better to provide a lifetime benefit. Okay, this is just a few more details about this discussion, comparing a pool plan to an individual account plan. So you can see, if you look at, I've defined them on the left, and then on the right, I've charted out the difference. So if you look at the third line, benefits received after 28 years, you've received $239,000 and change compared to $197,000. So it's pretty clear there which way to go. That is it seems to me the only reason you'd give that up is that your members want control of their money. They want to be able to invest it the way they want. We hear this, I know how to invest. I want to invest in myself. I want to be more aggressive. Okay, let me just say now as a sidebar that ability to invest individually is being limited by the courts. I don't know if you've been following it, but for the last couple of years, there has been a lot of litigation challenging the investment choices of defined contribution plans, be they 457 or 403B or 401k. And the courts are saying that it's not so easy for the fiduciaries to pass along the fiduciary responsibility for the investment choices of their 401k plan participants. That is, if the fiduciaries have put out choices that are not prudent, maybe they have high fees, maybe they're too aggressive, even though the person chose it, they may still be able to successfully sue the fiduciary for a breach of fiduciary duty. This is very topical right now. My firm is looking closely at it. And we have until now in our individual account plans allowed participants to choose. You want to invest conservative? We usually give them 3 or 4 choices, from very conservative to some kind of 60-40 mix. I'm not sure we're going to continue that because of these recent cases, including the recent Supreme Court case of Hughes versus Northwestern University. So until now, that might have been a reason to go with an individual account plan, because you could give the members choices. However, now it looks like that could really get a fiduciary in hot water. It could hurt the individuals for sure. Imagine if someone goes into the most aggressive choice, let's say it's a 70-30 investment portfolio. They put their individual account money in there. It might be their sick leave transfer money. And then the market tanks. Maybe it drops 40%. And then, God forbid, the person dies. Okay, the surviving spouse of that person is not going to be very happy about that. And could sue the plan saying, why did you give my spouse that choice? I now have 40% less money than I would have had to spend on retiree medical. So the individual account plan is looking like a less appealing choice as these cases come in. All right, so back to the description of the pooled account. The monthly benefit level is set by the trustees based on actuarial projections, length of service, etc. Now that's also a plan design decision. We have some plans who say if you're in the plan for 20 years, you're going to get the plan benefit. You know, if you're in for 20 years as a working employee, you're going to get whatever the benefit is. 700. I know we have one at 700 a month. Others over time have switched to a graduated benefit, so that the longer you're in the plan, the higher your benefit. This is a philosophical decision for the trustees to make, whether they want to give everyone the same benefit. But what happened is we had people who were only in the plan for, say, 10 years. That is, we've seen in the police world, for instance, more movement. It used to be that you became a police officer or a firefighter and you stayed in one jurisdiction your whole career. Just like the economy at large, that's become more, employees have become more mobile. So let's say you're in this plan for 10 years and you're putting in money every month, and it could be an all employee contribution. That is, it could be employer or employee contribution. And then you leave for whatever reason. Those people started coming to the trustee saying, hey, can't I get something? I've been putting in for 10 years. So many of the plans switched where they would give half the benefit. You know, if you were in for 10 years, then when you hit the retirement age, you'd get half the benefit. So that's totally a plan design decision, and you know, I can lay out some of the pros and cons if you want. As I've been saying, benefits are not vested, they're variable. The retiree gets a payment from the trust office. You know, you set up a trust office, just like a pension plan office, that will wait to get the substantiation of a medical expense, and then they pay out the benefit. So the retiree can send every month their pension check that shows $600 went to health coverage. That's all the trust office needs to see, and they'll send out a check for $600. If the benefit is actually $700 a month and they only have a $600 expense, some plans allow them to carry over in case they have another expense later. Maybe later on they're going to have an expense that's not covered by their health plan, a copay, or you know, counseling that's not covered. So we do want the participants to use up their benefit. So if the benefit's at $700 a month, they're only using $600 on their premium, they can save up the $100 a month till they need it. We don't want these benefits not to get used. We want them to be used. There was something else I wanted to say about that. The trust offices try to streamline this process. We try to make it as simple as possible, but the retiree does have to submit some kind of substantiation every month. This is a IRS rule. We fought it. We wanted to just submit once a year, but you have to submit every month. Okay, the benefit generally is intended to last a lifetime, or the trustees can decide we're going to cut it off at Medicare. And as I've said, the trustees can build in a surviving spouse benefit. All of them have. I've not had a plan say to me, we don't want a surviving spouse benefit. I think in a community property state that might be a problem. So generally, we would recommend having a surviving spouse benefit. Now, here's a topic I hadn't touched on yet. For police and fire, as you probably know, there's often a sick leave or a vacation leave buildup. And just jurisdictions have many ways of dealing with that. They might have a sick leave cash out. They might have a provision that you can convert your sick leave into pension credit, different things you can do with it. But the problem is if there's a cash out, it's taxable income. That was wages. So someone might get, it's not unusual in the police and fire world to get a $20,000 sick leave cash out, sometimes much larger. So if it's $20,000, it could be you're only going to get $15,000 because 25% went to taxes. So again, just like the wage transfer into this trust, if it gets transferred into the trust, it will not be taxed. Now, the condition, that is the whole $20,000 will go into the trust. The condition for that is it cannot be elective. This is based on tax principles of constructive receipt. So it has to be in the bargaining agreement that the parties agree sick leave is going to go into the trust. Now, it's not going to go into that big pool that we talked about. This is obviously that one person's money. So for this transaction, the money will go into a record-keeping account in the trust. So the person might be getting $600 a month for their benefit, plus they have a small individual account, and they can draw on that whenever they want it. And this is fairly common. As I said earlier, we had been allowing people to invest that individual account. I don't know if we're going to continue to allow that, but it'll be there. They can use it up. You know, you can use up $20,000 pretty quickly on premiums, and then they would still have their pooled benefit, their monthly benefit of whatever it is, $600 a month. So if they have a $10,000 orthodontia bill for their kids that's not covered, they could pull $10,000 out of their individual account to pay for that orthodontia bill. All right, so that gets contributed pre-tax. The bargaining language has to be very clear that it's mandated for everyone. Okay, now we understand that members may not want to give up their sick leave. They probably had plans. They've been saving a long time for that sick leave cash out. So this is something for the unions to talk to their members about. Well, like, where do you want to put this? Shall we put 50% into the trust and you'll get 50% in cash, and the 50% they get in cash will be taxed? That's a political decision for the union to discuss with their members. But if they put it in the trust, again, will never be taxed, and it will earn interest tax-free. So we haven't seen these individual accounts not get used. I mean, they get used up. It's possible the person won't use it up, but if the person dies, the surviving spouse can use it, surviving dependents can use it. So it's not as if it's going to happen very often that the person loses the money that they earned in sick leave. But if in fact they die and there's something left in their sick leave account and they have no surviving spouse or children, then the money will forfeit into the plan. It cannot go back to the family or to the heir of the person. It's got to go back to the plan. It can only be spent on the retiree, spouse, surviving children. We think this is a very good feature of the plan. It gives an incentive to the retirees, to the working employees to save their leave. Of course, having a sick leave cash out also does, but this is even better because they're never going to pay tax on it. What we have found is that employers come to us because they like this whole idea as a retention issue, that is the whole idea of a retiree medical trust. It's a retention issue, it's a recruitment, it's a retention tool, it's a recruitment tool. Having the sick leave is an incentive to save your sick leave. So this really works into a larger scheme of, how to get and keep good employees. All right, so as I said, there's no elective self-pay of your sick leave. It has to be negotiated for everybody in the bargaining unit, and it must be mandatory at the same level. Okay, now I want to talk about another use of the individual account. Let's say you have a plan that says at 20 years, you're going to get the full lifetime benefit. And it's like, we just had a plan that picked $1,100 a month. Their actuary told them they can get $1,100 a month if they're there for 20 years. Okay, but some people lateral in. They don't join the plan till they're 48. They're not going to be able to put in 20 years. As I say, this is happening more and more in the police world. Or somebody joins a fire department and they leave after 10 years for whatever reason, health, they found something else. That is not everyone stays for 20 years. So in those cases, you could do one of two things. You could either lower the monthly benefit. At 10 years, that might make sense. If it's $1,100, you'll get $550. But let's say you're only in for 5 years. The benefit could be pretty small, maybe not worth stringing it out for the lifetime of the retiree. So let's say they leave at age 40. They don't get the benefit then. They don't get the benefit till the retirement age of the plan. So we have transferred people's contributions into an individual account if they don't stay in the plan for the full eligibility period. So if they're in the plan for 5 years, and we have found with at least police plans, many people drop out in the first 5 years. People decide this isn't the career they thought it was. And so they're out. But they put in, let's say they put in $300 a month for 5 years. So what we do then is we put it into an individual reimbursement account. They can take it out quickly. We really don't want to hold those people on the plan's rolls until they reach age 55. So we set up an individual account, and they can pull it out as soon as they want, and all their contributions are transferred to that account. And if they die, the spouse benefit's available. So that's just one of the kind of minor features of these plans. Okay, so that's actually the end of my prepared remarks. I do want to say that having been a benefits lawyer my whole career and worked on many types of benefit plans, this is the most tax favored and, to me, a very important tool to meet the social problem, the broad social problem of helping retirees deal with their medical expenses.
Great. Thank you, Shana, for that great presentation. So we do have some questions. The first question comes through our chat. So let me just quickly read it to you, Shana. VIBA is just a version of RMT. Is that correct?
Not exactly. VIBA, let me just give a little extra detail, even though this question didn't ask for it. VIBA stands for Voluntary Employee Beneficiaries Association. It's a big term. It's overused. The term VIBA is overused and somewhat misunderstood. A VIBA is basically a tax-exempt trust. It's something that Congress has decided you can set up this trust, and we're not going to tax any earnings on that trust if you use it to provide health benefits and other kinds of benefits, but we're deciding now on health benefits. So if you set it up according to the VIBA rules, then you're not going to get taxed. So I would say a little of the reverse of what the questioner said, which is an RMT is a type of VIBA. There are many types of VIBAs, and RMT is one of them.
Great, thank you for that clarification. And then there's multiple parts to this. So the questioner says, continues, I believe that VIBAs provide the actual health plan that retirees could choose to participate in, and the VIBAs reduced, and wait, let me rephrase.
Could you speak a little louder, Hank?
Oh, sure. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's better.
Is that better? Okay. So the second part of the question is, I believe that VIBAs provide the actual health plan that retirees could choose to participate in, and the VIBAs reduced premium. Is that correct?
No, it's partly correct. Some VIBAs are the vehicle in which a health plan is held. That is, the VIBA can be the policyholder of a health plan, and then if it has reserves and it has earnings, it won't get taxed. But I don't know how VIBAs reduce premiums. That is, VIBAs have nothing to do with cost. They're a way to avoid tax. But let me take this one step further. Our RMTs to date have not purchased a retiree health plan. That is, they're just giving out money so the person can go buy their own health plan. However, I have been in discussions with a National Blue Cross group who would like to capture this market of police and firefighters and public sector employees who are buying health plans and aren't necessarily getting it from their prior employer. So it's possible that the next stage of Retiree Medical Trust is that we'll actually offer a retiree health plan, and if you hit the 20 years or whatever the rule is, you'll be eligible for that health plan. But to date, that's not what's happening. And to go back to the question, if we did that, a VIBA that was offering a health plan to 1,000 retired police officers might be able to get you a lower premium than going out and buying your own health plan. It no doubt would, because you'd get the economies of scale. You'd get the large market prices. So in that sense, a VIBA might reduce a premium, but it's really not because it's in a VIBA, it's because it's a large group.
Okay. And then, Shana, it sounds like you already answered the third and last part of this question, but let me just repeat it so that we're explicit. So the third part is, per this presentation, it seems like an RMT provides actual monthly cash distribution that makes the individuals are on their own to find the actual plan.
That is correct. We're reimbursing the person who's gone out found a health plan, paid for it, and then they submit their expense, their canceled check or whatever it is, they submit it to the plan and the plan pays it. We do have a couple plans that actually will pay directly to the employee's prior employer, because the city's offering a health plan to its retirees, but the retirees have to pay for it. So in that case, the trust office will send a check directly to the city for that health plan, and the person may not have to go through the paperwork.
Great. And folks, again, we have a few more minutes. If you have any questions or follow-ups, please submit them using the Q&A function of Zoom. So Shana, in your experience, has it been difficult to get employers to participate in one fashion or another with an RMT?
Employers sometimes have an initial resistance because they see, oh my God, another benefit plan and all the rules with benefit plans. I don't want to see another benefit plan. But if you can get past that initial kind of emotional reaction and show them that all the employer is going to have to do is put a monthly contribution, an aggregate contribution that you're going to negotiate, then employers start to see the value of the plan. They see, okay, the union that wants to set this up is going to run the thing. All I have to do is put money into it. And it gets this monkey off my back, because the unions keep saying, we need retiree health. We need something. You're either taking away what we have, or our members are, they're not being able to pay their rent. We need to have some kind of retiree medical benefit. We're making it simple for you, Mr. Employer. And then we usually get employers actually quite interested. We've had a couple cases where an employer has come to us and said, I have $60 million set aside for retiree medical for my employees. I want them to have retiree medical, but I don't want to deal with GASB. I don't want to deal with OPEB. I actually just want to transfer that money to a trust and let the unions run it. So employers start to see the value of this, because many of these plans are union run if the employer wants to wash their hands of running another benefit plan. So our resistance generally won't come from the employers, and it doesn't come from the union leaders. It will come from the members. In the beginning, the members are like, I don't want to give up this money for my retiree health. They're 25 years old. They can't even imagine being 55. It's only like in their late 30s, early 40s, they start to think about it. But so the union usually will develop a type of educational campaign to go to everyone and say, hey, look, this is going to, out of $100, you're really only putting in 70 because we're saving you on your taxes, and give that kind of educational campaign to get the younger members to buy in. And then since I've been doing this now for, our first fund we set up in 1995, so we're coming up on 27 years. Now I have trustees or members who come to me and say, oh my God, we're so glad we set this up. We wish we'd done it sooner. Like, I wish I'd been in it longer. And so but you have to anticipate some amount of education for both the employer and the members.
So we do have a comment in the Q&A. It's not a question, but as a proud endorsement of the plan Shana created for the Washington State Council of Firefighters in Washington State. Shana, last question. May active employees access the benefits of a RMT? Okay,
good question. That is what we call active access. It means active employees want to get their benefits. Okay, legally the answer is yes, but there are many problems with it, and we recommend against it. Here's why. First of all, active employees have usually, almost universally in the public sector, have health coverage. So although that might not cover everything, we urge them not to allow active access so that this money is available on retirement. A much bigger reason even is that it implicates ACA regulation. That is, if you run what's called under the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, if you run it only for retirees, it's called a retiree-only plan, and you avoid a lot of the rules of the ACA, which I'm sure most of you know are pretty onerous. The minute you allow actives to access their benefits, you have an actives plan, and then you have to comply with a lot of ACA rules. It adds quite a bit of administrative burden, and of course you're watering down the benefit also, so there's not as much left for retirees. So we do not recommend that you allow active access.
Great. Well, Shana, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation and your time and expertise. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us today. This will be
Hank?
yes,
Hank,
go ahead,
excuse me.
Shana.
Would you mind mentioning the booklet in case any of them want it? I'll be glad to send it to them.
Yeah, sure. The Retiree Medical Trust, the second edition is going to be printed. They will be available to attendees who come to the ACE conference later on this month. And Shana has additional copies should you want it. Shana, did you want to add anything else to that?
Well, I mean, we're very proud of this. I've worked on it with NCPERS. We created a booklet called Creating a Retiree Medical Trust. It gives you more detail than what I've been able to give you today, gives examples. And so we do want to make that available to anyone who's interested. You can contact Hank or myself, and I'll be happy to send you a copy.
Great. Thank you, Shana. And so, folks, thank you so much for joining us today. This will be the last webinar for this month, and because we have, as I mentioned, ACE coming up, and we will probably have another webinar scheduled sometime in the summer. So, Shana, again, thank you so much.
My pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, Hank, for the opportunity.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.